The tow truck's engine rumbled to life at 6:42 a.m., and Daniel Torres watched through his kitchen window as his own car disappeared down the street. Again. 47 years old, a cardiovascular surgeon who'd just worked a 16-hour shift saving a teenager's life. And he couldn't even park in his own driveway because his neighbors treated it like their personal guest parking. 3 months of this nightmare. 3 months of polite notes left on windshields ignored. 3 months of cordial door knocks met with eye rolls and slammed doors. 3 months of watching the Hendersons' endless parade of visitors block his driveway while they laughed about it over backyard cocktails. But today, everything was about to change, because the exhausted surgeon they'd been dismissing had finally stopped asking nicely. Before we dive into how Daniel transformed from doormat to demolition expert, if you love stories where entitled neighbors finally face consequences and patience runs out in the most satisfying ways, hit that like button and subscribe. Now let's see exactly how this unfolded. This is a story in 3 parts. The violation that pushed a dedicated professional past his breaking point. The confrontation where careful planning met entitled arrogance. And the resolution where creativity triumphed over entitlement. The first outline takes us through Daniel's descent into frustration. A man who saved lives for a living couldn't save his own sanity as his neighbors turned his driveway into their personal parking lot. Watch as polite requests dissolved into mockery, as property rights meant nothing against entitled attitudes, as every attempt at resolution met with contempt. The breaking point arrived not with anger, but with cold calculation. Sometimes the most dangerous opponent is the one who stops getting angry and starts getting creative. The second outline reveals the trap Daniel set with surgical precision. When you underestimate a man who plans operations down to the second, you make a fatal mistake. The Hendersons thought they knew their neighbor, the quiet doctor who worked too much to fight back. They had no idea they'd awakened something far more dangerous. A problem solver with resources, connections, and absolutely nothing left to lose. The confrontation came not with shouting, but with the rumble of diesel engines and the smile of a man who'd finally found the perfect solution. The third outline delivers justice with poetic symmetry. Sometimes revenge isn't about destruction. It's about showing people exactly what they've been doing to others. The Hendersons had treated Daniel's property like their own. Now they'd understand how that felt. The resolution would teach lessons about respect, consequences, and the dangerous assumption that kind people will tolerate disrespect forever. Here's exactly how it happened. Daniel Torres had purchased the narrow Victorian townhouse in Seattle's Capitol Hill neighborhood 4 years ago, drawn by its proximity to Harborview Medical Center and the quiet tree-lined street. The property came with 2 parking spaces, a luxury in the densely packed neighborhood, accessed by a shared driveway that ran between his house and the Hendersons' property next door. His deed clearly stated both spaces belonged to him. The Hendersons had their own driveway on the other side of their house, with 3 spaces of their own. It should have been simple. It should have been respectful. It wasn't. The first incident happened on a Friday evening in late June. Daniel had just completed a 7-hour valve replacement surgery and drove home at nearly midnight. His hands still trembling slightly from the precision work, his mind foggy with exhaustion. A silver Lexus sat squarely across his driveway entrance, blocking both spaces. He sat in his car for 10 minutes, too tired to process the situation, before finally parking 3 blocks away and walking home in the rain. The next morning, he left a polite note under the Lexus's wiper. "Hello. You parked across my driveway at 465 Melrose. If you're visiting the Hendersons, their parking is on the north side. Thanks for understanding." The note disappeared. No apology came. He assumed it was an honest mistake by someone unfamiliar with the neighborhood. 2 weeks later, it happened again. This time, a BMW blocked his driveway on a Sunday afternoon. Daniel had been called in for an emergency surgery, a car accident victim with internal bleeding, and couldn't leave his house. He knocked on the Hendersons' door, interrupting what sounded like a dinner party. Margaret Henderson, a real estate agent in her early 50s with perfectly highlighted hair and a permanently condescending expression, opened the door with a wine glass in hand. Daniel explained the situation politely, urgently. Margaret glanced back at her guests, then looked at Daniel with barely concealed irritation. "It's just for a few hours," she said. "Can't you Uber?" The door closed before he could respond. He'd taken an Uber, arrived 20 minutes late, and the patient had died on the table. The doctor said it wouldn't have mattered, that the injuries were too severe, but Daniel would never know for sure. The third incident shattered any illusions of neighborly cooperation. On a Wednesday evening in August, Daniel came home from a particularly brutal day. He'd lost a patient during surgery, a 19-year-old athlete whose heart had simply given out, and found not one but two vehicles blocking his driveway, a Tesla and a Range Rover, parked side by side as if his property were a public lot. Daniel could hear laughter and music from the Hendersons' backyard. He walked to their back gate and peered over. 12 people, cocktails, string lights, a catered affair. He knocked on the gate. Margaret's husband, Robert, a corporate attorney with the build of a former college athlete gone soft, swaggered over. Daniel explained again that he couldn't access his property. Robert looked at him like he'd asked to join their party uninvited. "Dude, we have guests. Move your car to the street for one night. What's the big deal?" The casual dismissiveness, the expectation that Daniel should accommodate their party, the complete lack of regard for his property rights, something cracked inside him. But Daniel didn't yell. He didn't threaten. He simply nodded, walked away, and parked 4 blocks away in a sketchy area where his window would be smashed by morning. That night, sitting in his ransacked car, waiting for the police to file a report he knew would go nowhere, Daniel made 3 phone calls. The first was to his lawyer. The second was to the property management company that handled his rental properties. The third was to his college roommate, who now owned the largest construction and demolition company in the Pacific Northwest. He asked questions, took notes, and over the next 2 weeks, Daniel documented everything. Security cameras went up, angled to capture his driveway and the Hendersons' property. He photographed every vehicle that blocked his access, noting dates, times, and durations. He reviewed his property deed with his lawyer, confirming every detail of his rights. He researched local parking ordinances, towing regulations, and property law. And he watched the Hendersons learning their patterns. Their daughter visited every Tuesday. They hosted parties every Friday and Saturday. Robert left for work at 7:15 a.m., Margaret at 8:30 a.m. They had become predictable in their entitlement. And on September 18th, when Daniel saw the permit approval in his mailbox, everything was finally ready. The construction dumpster arrived at 6 a.m. on a Saturday morning, the hydraulic lift screaming as it lowered the massive blue container precisely where Daniel had marked with spray paint the night before. Directly across the Hendersons' driveway, blocking all 3 of their parking spaces. The 40-yard dumpster was enormous, stretching nearly 22 feet long, 8 feet wide, and standing over 6 feet tall, a wall of corrugated steel that transformed their driveway from accessible to completely impassable. Daniel stood on his porch in his bathrobe, coffee in hand, as the delivery driver handed him the rental paperwork. "You sure about the placement?" the driver asked, eyeing the Hendersons' house. "Permits approved for 2 weeks of exterior renovation work," Daniel said calmly, showing the city permit that listed his address but authorized equipment placement on the shared property line. "This is exactly where it needs to be." The driver shrugged and drove away. Daniel waited. At 7:03 a.m., Robert Henderson emerged from his front door in golf clothes, keys jingling, heading for his Mercedes parked in their garage. Daniel watched through his window as Robert processed the situation. Initial confusion, a double take, then the slow-building rage of a man whose Saturday tea time had just been obliterated by several tons of steel. Robert marched across the lawn, his face reddening with each step. Daniel opened his door before Robert could knock. "Morning, Robert," Daniel said pleasantly. "What the hell is this?" Robert jabbed his finger toward the dumpster. "You can't just block our driveway." Daniel took a slow sip of coffee, letting the irony hang in the air between them. "Actually, I can. I have a city permit for exterior renovation. The dumpster placement follows all local ordinances. You're welcome to call the city if you'd like to verify." Robert's jaw worked soundlessly for a moment. You did this on purpose." "This is about parking." Daniel's pleasant expression never wavered. "This is about my property renovation. Though I'm fascinated that you immediately understood how frustrating it is to have your driveway blocked. That must be a terrible feeling." The calm delivery made it worse than any shout could have. Robert's face went from red to purple. "You passive-aggressive piece of—" Margaret appeared behind him in yoga clothes, her expression shifting from confusion to fury as she took in the dumpster. "Oh, you want to play games?" Margaret stepped forward, her voice sharp. "I'm calling the HOA. I'm calling the city." "You can't." Daniel held up his phone, the screen showing a video clip. "Before you make any calls, Margaret, you should see this." He played the footage. Crystal clear security camera video of the Hendersons' last party, showing Robert directing a guest to park across Daniel's driveway, laughing and saying, "The doctor never complains. He's too busy saving lives to worry about parking." Margaret's face went pale. "I have 17 separate incidents documented," Daniel continued, his voice calm and clinical. "June 24th, silver Lexus, license plate AXM 4921, blocked my driveway for 6 hours while you hosted dinner. July 8th, BMW X5, blocked access for 4 hours during your birthday party. August 12th, 2 vehicles, Tesla and Range Rover, resulting in my car being vandalized when I was forced to park on the street." He scrolled through his phone, showing timestamps, photos, license plates. Margaret Henderson, age 52. Henderson Realty Group, specializing in luxury Capitol Hill properties. Robert Henderson, age 54, senior partner at Caldwell & Associates, specializing in corporate litigation. Your daughter Jessica visits every Tuesday and parks across my driveway approximately 70% of the time. Your son Brandon, age 24, living in Portland, visits monthly and has blocked my access on 4 separate occasions. Daniel's tone remained perfectly professional, but the implication was clear. He knew everything. Robert's anger shifted to uncertainty. "How do you—" Daniel interrupted. "I'm a cardiovascular surgeon, Robert. I spend my days researching, documenting, and solving problems with precision. Did you really think I wouldn't eventually apply those same skills to this situation?" Margaret found her voice, though it trembled slightly. "This is harassment. We'll sue you for—" Daniel held up a manila folder. "This is a formal cease and desist letter from my attorney, documenting 3 months of ongoing trespassing and property access violations. This," he pulled out another document, "is a calculation of damages, towing fees, parking tickets, the vandalism repair, and the quantified cost of my time. Total comes to $4,347, and this," he showed his phone again, "is a draft email to the Washington State Bar Association regarding Robert's conduct, specifically advising a guest to illegally block a neighbor's driveway." Robert went very still. An ethics complaint could impact his partnership. "What do you want?" Robert asked finally, the bluster gone from his voice. Daniel smiled for the first time. "I want you to understand what you've put me through. See, you've treated my property like it doesn't matter, like my time doesn't matter, like I don't matter. So for the next 2 weeks, while I complete my very legitimate exterior renovation project, you'll experience exactly what you've done to me. You'll park on the street. You'll walk blocks to your house. You'll feel the inconvenience you've casually inflicted on me for months." Margaret shook her head. 2 weeks? We can't. Daniel cut her off. Or I can file formal charges for criminal trespassing, pursue civil damages, and send that ethics complaint. Your choice. The silence stretched. A morning jogger passed by, staring at the dumpster and the confrontation unfolding on Daniel's porch. Finally, Robert spoke, his voice defeated. "Fine, 2 weeks. Then you remove it." Daniel nodded. 2 weeks. And after that, if any vehicle blocks my driveway ever again, I'll have it towed immediately. No warnings. We clear? They were clear. Daniel watched them walk back to their house, Margaret already on her phone, presumably canceling plans. Robert's shoulders slumped in defeat. As they disappeared inside, Daniel allowed himself a full smile. Justice didn't always come from police or courts. Sometimes it came from a surgeon's precision and a well-placed dumpster. The first week played out exactly as Daniel had orchestrated. The Hendersons parked 3 blocks away, hauling groceries through the rain. Their daughter Jessica arrived Tuesday, saw the dumpster, and left without visiting. A delivery truck blocked traffic for 20 minutes trying to figure out how to access their house. Daniel watched it all from his window while sipping coffee, occasionally waving pleasantly when Margaret glared at him from her living room. He did actually complete some exterior work, painting his trim, replacing a section of gutter, partially to justify the permit, partially to twist the knife by working on sunny Saturday afternoon while Robert trudged past carrying golf clubs he couldn't use because he couldn't get to his car. The breaking point came on day 9. Daniel arrived home from a midnight shift to find police lights in front of his house. A patrol officer stood on his porch, and Margaret Henderson stood on her lawn, arms crossed triumphantly. "Are you Daniel Torres?" the officer asked. Daniel nodded, suddenly exhausted. "This woman says you've illegally blocked her driveway with a construction dumpster." Daniel pulled out his permit, his documentation, his property deed. The officer reviewed everything under his flashlight, occasionally glancing at Margaret, whose confident expression gradually crumbled. "Sir, this is all in order," the officer said finally. "The dumpster placement is legal. Ma'am, filing a false police report wastes city resources. I suggest you settle this neighbor dispute privately." Margaret's face flushed. "But he did it deliberately to—" The officer held up his hand. "Legal is legal. Good night, folks." As the patrol car pulled away, Daniel turned to Margaret. In the streetlight, he could see she'd been crying. "We get it," she said quietly, her earlier arrogance completely gone. "We get it, okay? We were terrible neighbors. We were entitled and dismissive, and we treated you like you didn't matter. I'm sorry." The genuine contrition caught Daniel off guard. He studied her face, looking for manipulation, but saw only exhaustion and shame. Robert's senior partner asked why he's been so stressed, Margaret continued. When he explained, the partner told him he was being an asshole, and that if you did file that ethics complaint, it would be deserved. "Jessica won't talk to us because she's embarrassed we raised her to think other people's property doesn't matter. And She gestured helplessly at her house. "I had to cancel 2 showings this week because I couldn't guarantee my own driveway access. I'm living what we did to you. And it's humbling." Daniel felt his anger, so carefully maintained over 3 months, begin to crack. "I didn't want to be vindictive," he said finally. "I just wanted you to understand. Every time you blocked my driveway, you weren't just inconveniencing me. You were telling me my life, my work, my property, none of it mattered as much as your convenience?" Margaret nodded, wiping her eyes. We know that now, and we'll never do it again. I promise you, Daniel, we will never block your driveway or disrespect your property again. Please, can we end this? Daniel considered. He could keep the dumpster for another 5 days, really drive the lesson home. But Margaret's genuine remorse, the family consequences she'd described, the look of real understanding in her eyes, this was what he'd actually wanted. Not cruelty, but recognition. I'll have it removed Monday, he said. 3 days early. The following Monday, the dumpster disappeared at dawn. By noon, the Hendersons' driveway was clear. Their cars returned to their garage. That evening, Daniel found a basket on his porch. Expensive wine, artisan chocolates, and a handwritten note from both Hendersons. We're sorry. We were terrible neighbors. Thank you for teaching us a lesson we clearly needed. We'll do better. Over the next month, the transformation was remarkable. When Jessica visited, she parked at 1 or 2 blocks away, walking past 3 empty spaces rather than risk the Hendersons' driveway. When they hosted a rare gathering, guests parked on the street without complaint. One Saturday morning, Daniel woke to find Robert power washing the shared driveway section, the entire thing, including Daniel's portion, without being asked. 2 months after the dumpster incident, Daniel was loading groceries when Margaret approached from her yard. They'd barely spoken since that night with the police. I wanted you to know, she said hesitantly, that situation changed us. Robert and I have been so focused on our careers, our social status, our convenience, that we forgot basic decency. You could have sued us, filed complaints, made our lives hell. Instead, you gave us exactly what we deserved and a chance to learn from it. My daughter told me she's actually proud of how we responded once we understood, so thank you. For having boundaries, for enforcing them, for teaching us. 3 months later, on a cold December evening, Daniel pulled into his driveway after a grueling 20-hour shift. His parking spaces were clear, the driveway pristine. He sat in his car for a moment, warm air blowing from the vents, and thought about that night with the tow truck, the rage and helplessness he'd felt. He thought about the dumpster, the confrontation, Margaret's tears, and the lesson that had finally taken root. Sometimes justice doesn't come from a courtroom or a police report. Sometimes it comes from a surgeon's precision, a well-placed dumpster, and the refusal to be disrespected in your own home. As Daniel gathered his things and walked to his door, he noticed the motion sensor light from the Hendersons' garage. They'd installed it to illuminate the shared driveway, making it safer for both houses. Small considerations, he'd learned, could rebuild what entitlement had broken. And as he unlocked his door and stepped into warmth, Daniel smiled. Because justice, whether served with a dumpster or with grace, was equally satisfying when it taught the lessons that mattered most. Across the country in Savannah, Georgia, 72-year-old Evelyn Park watched her HOA president mark her historic azalea garden for removal, citing uniformity standards. The president had no idea that the quiet widow was a retired federal judge with 40 years of case law memorized and a particular fondness for property rights litigation. Evelyn adjusted her reading glasses and smiled, the same smile that had once preceded devastating cross-examinations, as she pulled out the original neighborhood covenant from 1923. Please, she said softly, keep making demands. I haven't had a good legal battle since I retired, and I'd love to remind people why you never threaten a judge's garden. The president's clipboard clattered to the ground, but that's a story for another time.